Welcome back to building Elsa's winter ensemble from Olaf's Frozen Adventure. I will be showing you how I made the cape for the costume, and I'm just gonna be straight up with you. This took forever. This is definitely one of those projects where you look at it and you're like, wow, that's kind of cool, but I bet it didn't take that long. Oh, a couple of seams, a little bit of glitter glue. You're wrong. I was wrong. I thought this was gonna take me maybe 2 days. I don't even remember how many days I spent working on this because it just feels like it took forever. In this house we craft in pajamas. I don't want to keep you waiting, so let's get to it. I've decided it's finally time to start on the cape part of this. I've got 10 yards of navy organza, and hopefully it's enough because it's what I have, it's what I'm gonna use. Not quite sure how I'm gonna go about cutting all this out just yet. So I'm probably just gonna like play with a few things before I make any firm decisions. Oh, this is nice. It's a little darker than I think I had in my mind, but it'll work, it'll be just fine.
And you know what? It did work. It was just fine. But I only know that now that the whole thing is done. Back here, this video that you're watching, I truly did not know if this was going to work or not. I literally just kind of started draping things experimentally and, saying it with me, hoping for the best. One thing that I was absolutely sure about was that I did not want to compromise on the length of the cape. I wanted it to be long and full and dramatic, but to get that, I had to make a few, you know, length decisions. And once the fabric is cut, it's cut. There's no going back on it. You can't just make the fabric longer once you've cut it out. But it was starting to get dark and it was kind of starting to get late, and I have this rule where I do not cut fabric past 11 o'clock.
Okay, just kidding. I slept on it, worked some things out in my mind, waited for the sun to come back out, and I feel a lot better about what I'm about to do. So, originally, what I had kind of planned was I was just gonna sew these 3 panels together and then pleat it all into that section right there. But I think if I trim these into like little triangles, like going up this way, it's not gonna have so much bulk. I won't have to decorate as much fabric, and I could potentially use the scrap cut-off fabric on the sides to make the cape fuller, because I called everywhere. I looked online, nowhere carries this color of organza. Most of it has been sold out with like the winter stock colored fabric, and so what I have is what I have. And I'm gonna go with it. I'm just gonna do my best and hope for the best. That's what I have. So that's what we're doing.
In the spirit of do your best and hope for the best, I eyeballed a few cuts and then saved the parts I trimmed off to attach to the front part of the cape. I realize now that this is a very linear thought process, but at the time, I was genuinely feeling like I had hacked the system and was creating more fabric where there was none. Right about now, I had a small worry that the lines I was cutting weren't straight and even, and it turns out that no, they were not perfect, but they were close enough that it really didn't make a difference in the end, and that brings me peace. After I had everything relatively cut out to the shape I wanted, I seamed the pieces together with a straight stitch. Yes, this process took a while because I made the cape super long, and at this point I knew that I would eventually need to use a French seam to secure the fabric, but more on that later. Once I got to this point, I took a picture of the cape on my phone and used the draw feature on Instagram story to sketch out the snowflake-like cuts I planned to make.
Out here just figuring stuff out. This is a scrap piece that I cut off of like the big pieces. I'm thinking I might just fill in this like spot with this, because like without it, it's just like this giant deep V, but with it, more or less, I get more of a snowflake shape. I'm doing it.
I have these awesome jumbo measuring sticks that really come in handy for most measuring situations, and so I'm using them as line guides so I kind of know where to make the cuts. I knew this wasn't going to be perfect, but I decided that rather than worry about perfection, I would focus on being consistent. And I felt this whole cape was going to be a little wonky, but at least it would be consistently wonky, and that's gotta count for something. I folded the entire cape in half and made sure there weren't any ripples in the fabric. And because organza is a sheer fabric, you can see straight through it. So I followed my previous cuts and made the cape as symmetrical as possible. If you look closely, it's pretty obvious the two halves are not the same, but once I attached the cape to the dress, it was much less obvious. Next, it was time to sew all my previous seams into French seams. This basically just means that I trapped the exposed seam inside another seam to prevent it from fraying. I also top stitched each seam down securely so that everything sat flat and I didn't have any weird fabric seams one side or the other. This process is definitely better and easier if you iron each seam flat beforehand, But the thought of ironing each of these super long seams made me want to throw my machine out the window, so I skipped that step. Besides, organza is naturally a wiggly looking fabric, and I just decided to embrace that. Once the body of the cape was French seamed and top stitched, I needed to do something to keep the outer perimeter of the cape from fraying. So I folded down each edge by about 1/4 inch and sewed all of that down. And because the cape has a lot of pointy geometric shapes, I had to start and stop and pin and fold and sew for a while to do this step. And when I was done with that round of sewing, it was time for round 2, so I flipped each outside edge in on itself and sewed it all down again. I really did not want to face the consequences of this organza fraying, so I made sure to secure every inch of the edge down as good as I could manage. I always say this, but I literally never actually follow this advice. Pro tip: load a bunch of bobbins in your desired color before starting a sewing project. That way you don't have to start and stop as often. I should take that advice. That's my advice, and I should take it. After doing that, I carefully ironed out all the wrinkles from this organza fabric. For you visual learners out there, here is my sketch of what I kind of wanted the cape shape to look like, and this is what I actually ended up with. It's pretty close to what I envisioned, so I'll take that as a win. Now that the base cape is finished, it's time to add on all of those glittery snowflakes. These are the 2 images that I referenced most often. However, I do have an entire Pinterest board full of just Elsa images. If you're interested, I will link that down below.
I've already started the cape. And I didn't really know exactly what direction I wanted to go in, but I did know I had a lot of glitter glue, and so after a couple of samples, and I'll show those here.
And by a couple of samples, I literally mean just this one that I tried out. This is like some organza fabric that I had lying around, and I just piped the glitter glue out onto it into a snowflake shape. It held its shape for a while, but once I kind of like roughed it up, it started peeling off. That's when I decided I wasn't going to be able to just place it onto the fabric. I needed to smash it into the fabric somehow.
I decided to go with the method of squeezing it on in a somewhat symmetrical pattern and then taking a paintbrush and like smoothing it out just to kind of push the glitter glue into the fabric, and it's working phenomenally. So I'm just gonna keep going, and I am nowhere near close to being done.
This is the setup I started out with. So I've got a table that's covered in wax paper, and I put the wax paper down just to protect the table a little bit because, I mean, it's just straight up glitter glue that I'm putting on the fabric and then smashing down. And then I used some pins and an ironing board to kind of give me a guideline of where the very middle of the back of the cape would be at all times. That way I could mirror one side to the other to the best of my abilities. Ideally, I would have like come up with a whole sketch and made it life-size and printed it out and, you know, made it perfectly, but I decided I didn't have time for that, so I was just gonna eyeball it, and guess what? It was fine. It was absolutely fine. And that blows my mind because I always feel like, oh, it's not going to be perfect enough. And then at the end of these projects, I'm always like, it really didn't matter all that much. It didn't need to be perfect to 10 out of 10. Like 8 out of 10 is just fine. I've mentioned a couple of times now that this project took a long time, and we're definitely in that part of the project that is incredibly time consuming because I would paint on all of that glitter and then I would have to let it dry. So I would go get groceries or look at dogs or get a chicken from Costco, and then I would come back to my house and paint more and then go back out and look at cat magazines and then paint more on my cosplay and then take these random people to the airport and then come back to my cosplay. Like, do you see what I'm saying? There was very much a pattern of work here, and it was, I can't do this whole thing in one go because I don't have the space, and it takes at least 45 minutes to dry, and some areas take longer than that because there's just so much more glitter on them. I had a few snowflake references to look at while I was glitter gluing the cape, and most of them came from the Elsa cape itself. I always try to keep a reference image on hand while I'm making a cosplay because it's really easy to get off track, and then all of a sudden you don't have an Elsa costume, you have Party City Ice Queen. And not that there's anything wrong with letting your creativity go wild, but with this specific project, I wanted to stay as close to the source material as possible. I also found that even though the glitter glue takes a while to dry, there is a small time window wherein I was able to successfully paint it on. If I waited too long, it would get crusty and wouldn't glue itself to the fabric, and if I didn't wait long enough, then it would get really goopy and collect on my paintbrush more than on the organza. So to find that sweet spot, I would do a chunk of snowflakes, and after about 10 minutes, I would go back over everything with the brush. For this project, I exclusively used cut-right wax paper to protect my surfaces. Not because it's my preferred brand by any means, but because it's what I had in my kitchen! But seriously though, if I didn't put something over my table surfaces to protect them from the glitter glue, they would be covered in glitter and glue. That sounds obvious, because, you know, we're watching this together and this is a whole video about glitter gluing things. But if you ever thought, oh, I'm just gonna do it really quick without protecting my surface, definitely don't. Put like a tablecloth or something down, because it sucks to have to peel all the glue off of your table. While I was making all of these snowflakes on the cape, I was reminded of an experience that I had when I was like, I don't know, maybe in 2nd or 3rd grade. So I'm like 8 years old, maybe 8, and we go to the library with all of the classmates in our school, and it was wintertime, and we get a lot of snow where I grew up, so snowflakes and snowmen and snowballs were like a big hit at recess time, right? So we're in the library listening to the librarian tell us this story. Well, she's not telling us a story, she's reading us a story called Snowflake Bentley. And it's about this guy that was obsessed with photographing snowflakes. And I remember being so enthralled by this story and just so totally into it. And I was like, when I go home, I'm gonna look at snowflakes, I'm gonna get a microphone, I'm gonna get a spyglass or whatever it is kids have, and I'm gonna look at these snowflakes. Well, at the end of the story, Snowflake Bentley dies, and instead of going home all excited about snowflakes, I went home heartbroken because this historical figure wasn't around anymore. I've completely lost track of how many days I've actually been working on this. It's taken so long. It wouldn't take as long if I could just like do all the snowflakes at once, but I can't. I have to do them in sections because my table's not big enough. And I could have made the cape a lot smaller. Could have made it half the size, half the length. But no. I asked for drama, and I'm getting drama. Okay, hopefully. Hopefully this isn't an ugly disaster. I haven't seen it on the mannequin yet, but we're halfway, and I have to just keep going. Like, I'm to the point where it's like I can't just stop. I can't leave this project as is. And as is typical with stuff like this and me, is that like while I was waiting for this project to get finished and dry so I could work on the next thing, I've planned something else. And I would much rather just get started on that new project than finish this old project. But alas, it must be finished. The last few hours of putting glitter on this cape honestly feel like such a fever dream. I just binged watched season 8 of RuPaul's Drag Race and did my best not to absolutely lose my mind. I ended up propping up the cape onto like various objects in hopes that it would dry faster, and then I got my blow dryer out and just like stood there and tried to blow dry the glitter glue as quickly as possible. I was legit losing my mind. My hands were tired from squeezing out all the glitter glue, and my brain was tired from just looking at this process. And we are here, coming to you from out in the garage. It is time to spray glitter spray all over the cape. We got the setup. Don't look too hard at it, Mom. And I've already done a little bit of glitter on like just the end right here, and you can see it definitely just amps up the amount of glitter that's on it. This stuff, this is great. Just shake it and spray it. We have finally arrived to the part of the costume that I was really looking forward to, which is just absolutely blasting the cape with a ton of glitter spray. I will not apologize for this ASMR moment. Also, another pro tip that maybe I should follow more is when you're spraying stuff like this, wear a mask and do it in a well-ventilated area. To attach the cape, you really can't see it, but I used the almighty safety pin. A lot of people bash on safety pins when you're making stuff like this and like historical garments or like functional fabric things. But I love safety pins, and here's why. If I was gonna sew this directly onto the cape and then some kid stepped on this and it ripped, I have to make sure that I have something on me that I can fix that with, and I don't want to carry an entire sewing kit with me. So that's where the safety pin comes in. The safety pins just pin directly on there. They're not going to poke into your skin or anything if you like stick them in right. And if it does rip or tear, you have safety pins just right there to fix things with. And I was really cautious about this cape during the photo shoot because there were just kids absolutely everywhere, and adults. There were adults everywhere, and I didn't want someone stepping on the back of my cape and then it ripping out and me being like, well, I guess everything's finished. And so using safety pins was a conscious decision on my part to make this cape more functional throughout the entire photo shoot. I don't even think I'm eventually going to sew this onto the back of the dress. I think I'm always just going to use safety pins because, in my opinion, they're fine. Monster. It's so big and honestly really hard to handle during the photo shoot. I need like one person on each side kind of like situating everything because doing it myself turned out to be very, very difficult. Also, when it gets wet, it kind of got a little crinkly, but I'm not too mad about that. All in all, I would call it like a 9 out of 10. It's not perfect, but it will definitely get the job done. I also kind of wanted to explain a little bit about the layers that I wore underneath this dress when I went to the ice castles. So the first layer was these just like thermal leggings. They have like a 32-degree rating. This was my first layer. And then I put these joggers on over those. And then I made a whole series about making a quilted petticoat to wear underneath this dress. Ultimately, that did not work because the quilted petticoat was so bulky underneath. And the dress looked so lumpy when I put the quilted petticoat on underneath it. And I was like, okay, this is not gonna work. I have to come up with something else. And ultimately what I ended up doing is I got some polar fleece and I made just a little A-line skirt to go over both the pairs of leggings. There really wasn't a ton that I could do for staying warm on my top part. So what I ended up doing is I bought a thermal shirt and I just cut the shoulders right off of it. And I trimmed the sleeves down so that they're really tight against my skin so they could fit underneath the dress. And then I put this on with my corset on over the top of that. And then I stuffed these little heat packs down my bra, which at first seemed like a really great idea. And it totally did keep me very, very warm. But what I should have done is I should have made a little fabric pouch to put these in and then stuffed them down my bra because I did get a few chemical burns and they were a little nasty. So pro tip, don't put these directly on your skin because they will burn you if you have them on for a couple of hours, which I did. As far as my thoughts on the entire project, I think it looks great. I think it looks exactly the way I kind of envisioned it in my mind. I think it's pretty comparable to what Elsa wears in the little show. However, if I were gonna do it all again, I would have set my craft room up with the big table set up from the beginning because I was doing really small portions of the glitter glue at first, and that ate my time up. I was doing a section this big and then had to wait hours for it to dry, only to do another section that's that big. So next time I do a big glitter project like this, my craft room is just getting rearranged from the beginning, and I'm just gonna use as big a space as I possibly can because that's what ended up saving me the most time and honestly the most stress because I was stressed about this costume. I was like, it's taking too long. It's taking me forever because of the dry time. Also, my fingers really started to hurt after a while from squeezing the glitter bottles. I'm sure there's a better way out there to use glitter glue. My husband suggested getting like a caulking gun and just like caulking the glitter out. And honestly,
At first I was like, no, I don't need that. But looking back, I finished doing the glitter glue on this project 2 weeks ago and my thumbs still hurt from pushing the little bottles of glitter glue out. So next time, bigger space, bigger tables, caulking gun. That's what I have to say about this. If you enjoyed this content, feel free to like and subscribe. More videos are on their way soon. The next video in this series is the wig and a short vlog about my experience at the ice castle, so you have that to look forward to. And remember, in this house, we craft in pajamas.
What's up, video?
It's a video.
Where are you going? We parked right there.